So we have The Police, their album Synchronicity from 1983. I have so much to say about this album. Do you remember the first time that you heard this album?
Yeah, I mean, I got into it late, like a lot of other things or other people do, wrapped around your finger. And it was just the mood that song gave me, like darkness, but also light on the other side of the tunnel or cave, whatever you want to say. And the musicality of simplicity, space, but using splashes and bells and stuff in the verse. It's like doom 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 God, and it's like what did he have? Just Tourette's on the snare drum? It just came out of nowhere, and just like the spacing and understanding where to save your tricks for treats and never do it again. Like, oh, that was a cool lick, so I'm gonna do it. He never do it again. He would never do it again. So, yeah, it's just that song is to me so iconic of just understanding space and setting a mood. With candles in the video, I saw it on VH1 of all places.
So the album had 5 singles: Every Breath You Take, Synchronicity 1, Wrapped Around Your Finger, like you just mentioned, King of Pain, and Synchronicity 2. And what's wild is this album sells 8 million copies just in the US. It sells 20 million albums globally, like one of the biggest albums of all time. At that point, they're essentially the biggest band in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
then that's it. This is the fifth and final album from The Police, and then Sting goes solo. It's just so crazy that they get to the very pinnacle and then call it
Yeah,
quits.
we don't want to do it anymore. We got to the point of being the biggest band. But there's a saying, quit while you're ahead.
That's true.
And there's tension. You know, they're only a three-piece. I couldn't imagine what they'd be like if they were a five-piece. They would have probably killed each other even more. But sometimes that tension creates beauty of writing music. And that band wasn't just boom, boom, caca, boom, boom, caca. They were like technicality there to be one of the biggest bands, like an Incubus. They have talent, they have technicality, musicality, and great hooks, great songwriting, great lyrical content. That was The Police, which I know Incubus was definitely influenced by.
To show you, or to educate our listeners on just how big this album was. So at the time where this was released, it had been Michael Jackson's Thriller that had just it had been number one forever, just dominating the charts.
Forever.
And then
Mm-hmm.
this album comes out and spends 17 non-consecutive weeks at number one. And it's the album to interrupt Michael Jackson's Thriller grip on the charts. So it's so crazy. That's the Thriller album's the biggest album of all time. So for this to be the one that comes in and basically snatches the title from it at number one for 17 weeks is wild.
And it wasn't like true pop, not to interrupt you, but it wasn't like true, like simple drum machine pop formula. There was some technicality in those guitar parts Andy Summers wrote, and his bass parts and his drums.
There's
For
different
that,
time signatures on there.
different
There's
time
dark
signatures,
lyrics about
dark
stalkers and
lyrics.
murder. It's like
Yeah, every
crazy.
breath you take sounds beautiful, but it's about stalking. It's like what? Tongue
Yeah.
in cheek kind of thing.
Yeah. So what's crazy is I mentioned it was at number one for 17 weeks in the US. In Canada, it was a number one for 24 consecutive weeks. And to this day, that is still the record all time in Canada. So since
Wow.
1983 in Canada, no album outside of this, no album has spent more than 24 consecutive. That's like half a year at number one. And every week there's 10 or 15 big major label albums that get released. So for a Taylor Swift comes around this week and an Ed Sheeran next week
That's
and an
insane.
Eminem the week after that, for 24 weeks, there's no album that could outsell it in Canada. It's wild.
That's insane. And they're not even from the States.
Yeah. Not
They're
from the
from
US, not from
overseas.
Canada. Yeah. Yeah, so that should paint the picture. It was nominated for 5 Grammys. It won 3 of them. It was up for Album of the Year, which is the big one. And I guess I wanted to talk about Stuart Copeland because I know, again, that's another one of your biggest influences. When I look
Uh-huh.
at lists that have the 10 greatest drummers of all time, Stuart Copeland's almost always on that list. And Rolling Stone themselves in 2016 put out a list of the best drummers of all time, and he was number
Uh-huh.
10. What makes him so special? And the more I interview drummers on this podcast, the more that name comes up.
He just didn't play like a typical drummer. Like at that time, it was like straightforward AC/DC. Nothing wrong with that. There's awesome parts that AC/DC has, but it was like Stuart Copeland just coming in and cleaning house. He was a drummer's drummer, like Neil Peart, but not as technicality as Neil Peart, but still wrote great drum hooks. Roxanne is another prime example where he flips the beat around. You don't do that in pop rock. You just don't. And he took those chances. And I'm sure he caught hell from it, like blah, 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 blah. And he'd be like, I'll show you. And now every drummer looks up to Stuart Copeland for taking that chance. Maybe the singer doesn't appreciate it. Maybe the guitar player doesn't appreciate it. But us in the same craft love every moment. Anything he played, we love. And I think the way he played the hi-hats, nobody was doing at that time. It was just keeping time. And he would break up those beats and let it breathe more. Like 30-second notes, grace notes, all these kind of things where it was like, what is that? I've never heard anything like that. What are these cymbals he's hitting that sound small, but they cut? It was just, no one can ever top that guy, to me. He played on Red Rain, Peter Gabriel, just hi-hat. That tells you something. If you're hired just to play hi-hat for a song, awesome.
That's wild. So I mentioned the accolades of just how big the album itself was. Now I want to
Uh-huh.
share how crazy the numbers are for the first single, Every Breath You Take. So it's one of the single most played songs on radio in human history. It has over 15 million plays just on radio. I'll keep going with these crazy numbers. It was the single best-selling song of 1983, so the entire year. It's the 5th best-selling single of that entire decade of the 80s. Rolling Stone has it at number 84 on the 500 greatest songs of all time. And this is the craziest point. Sting makes $2,000 a day on average, just from that one song. So if he never did anything for the rest of his life and he just sat there in a room, he would have $2,000 go in his bank account every single day just from this one song. And the Police have a whole career of hit songs.
Mind you, it crossed over too to a different genre. He gave it to P. Diddy.
Which was a massive hit, right? I'll Be Missing You.
Right when Biggie passed away. God rest in peace. So he used that. I'm sure Andy Summers and Stewart weren't happy with it, but those lyrics, that melody is iconic that you could cross it over to rap. Masterfully done, by the way, too. So on top of that, on his own merit of his own band, making tons of money off of it, then sending it out to a hip hop artist who makes more money on that too.
Yeah, they're not, the band's not hurting for money, that's for sure.
And mind you, can play that song and you're like, oh, it's such a pretty song. But lyrically, it isn't.
I have a story about that.
Really?
Yeah, I have a story here. So I remember in an interview hearing Sting say that, you know, people think it's a love song and it's one of the most played songs at weddings, and it's actually a dark
Exactly.
song about stalking and possession and those things. And so Sting says the lyrics and the words are about a possessive lover. So Sting said, I woke up in the middle of the night with the line, every breath you take, every move you make in my head. I sat down at the piano and I wrote the song in half an hour. The tune itself, it's generic. It's an aggregate of hundreds of other songs, but the words are interesting. It sounds like a comforting love song. I didn't realize at the time just how sinister it is. I think I was thinking about Big Brother surveillance and control. So that's the darkness in Every Breath You Take.
That's what I think is the best part about the song. You thought it was this because the music, and how the music can make an illusion where lyrically you're sliding something in the back door, and it's like, whoa, that's like dark. It's kind of like In the Air Tonight. I mean, there was many rumors, speculations of what that song really, how it was written. About like one I heard, Phil Collins' son, or not son, one of his brothers or something like that, was on ice and was drowning, and no one would save him. And the guy just watched his brother or someone, relative, friend, drown while no one tried to help him. And then he went to sound check and said they were playing something. He's like, keep that going. I got some lyrics. But then broke off the record. Or no, I think he went on Jimmy Fallon or something like that and really said it's about, I think, his divorce. And it's like, here's another song that's dark, but still pretty at the same time. And you hear doo 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 doo. And that's him literally taking his frustration, you know. It's crazy how music can play a perception in your head, but it's really not intended that way.
So I have a few more things about the song Every Breath You Take, and then I'd like to dive into some other songs like King of Pain
Mm-hmm.
and Mother.
Oh,
So
yeah.
for Every Breath You Take, so the video now, since YouTube came around, the video has 1 billion views on YouTube. The song itself was nominated for 3 Grammy Awards when it was released. We talked about Puff Daddy in 1997. That song went to #1 for 11 weeks. And that song, the Puff Daddy version, won a Grammy. And Sting actually came out with
Did it.
Puff Daddy on the MTV Music Awards. MTV.
Yeah, I think it was P. Diddy, Faith Evans, and Sting.
Yeah.
On that track.
It's so cool to see the different kind of generations and the different genres come together there.
Again, Living Color laid the groundwork. And so did Run DMC
With
and Aerosmith and Public Enemy and Anthrax.
Bring the noise.
Yeah, you don't see that anymore. We need to bring that back. You know, bring back different genres and mix them together. Linkin Park's a prime example. Hip hop with metal. It's great. It's a good fusion to try different things.
So Stuart Copeland had something to say about the music itself for the song. So he acknowledges that the song itself is great, but when it comes to what they were playing as musicians, he said this, which I thought was funny. He says, in my humble opinion, this is Sting's best song with the worst arrangement. I think Sting could have had any other group do this song and it would have been a better version than ours, except for Andy's brilliant guitar part. Basically, there's an utter lack of groove. It's a totally wasted opportunity for our band, even though we made gazillions off of it and it's the biggest hit we've ever had. When I listen to the recording, I think, God, what a bunch of assholes we were. So that's pretty funny.
It's funny you bring that up because every time a musician or a band writes something, they hate what they did, but the audience is like, it's the most iconic part. Prime example, a song, I Will Not Bow, where it goes, I will not bow, I will not break, ding, ding. And there's this ice bell I hit. I didn't come up with that. I don't take credit when I don't do something. I give credit where credit's due. And Ben, I wrote a bell part previous when we were writing the song together. And he took that, snipped it, and just went ding ding. And I'm like, that is the most dumbest part I've ever heard for a drummer to go ding ding. But then everyone comes up and goes, dude, I love that part, ding ding. I'm like, I don't even want to hear that.
And
I
then you're
don't
stuck
that
playing it forever.
and I'm stuck playing. And I almost make fun of it when I play it every time I go, right? But Stuart feels the same way, probably going boom, 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 and just hitting snare where he's like, I could have done hi-hats here, you know. But again, it is a masterpiece the way it was written. The people that wrote it maybe aren't attached to it. It was a bad experience recording it. But at the end of the day, we don't write songs just for us. We write to heal the world. Sometimes we're greedy and we write it for ourselves and we don't care what anyone thinks. But most of the time, the reason music is supposed to see the light of day is to help people through their problems.
So the song King of Pain, for some reason, that song, other artists love to cover it. So Alanis Morissette did an MTV Unplugged album and she covered that song. Mudvayne covered that song, which is a completely different genre. And then Weird Al, when a band is the biggest band in the world, Weird Al comes around and he parodied King of Pain, and it was King of Suede was the song.
Yeah. That song is weird because I think it's played on a marimba in the beginning part, but the snare comes in, there's a, and you're like, what? How did that? And you know how you're saying, what's the most challenging songs in that? That's another one because it comes out of nowhere. It's just space, 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 crack. And then the snare comes in, you're like, whoa, where did that come from? Those are the things that band was great at, like taking you for a loop. And it's like, but still, music was the most important thing to make it musical. And they did it. And Stuart, to me, was like, he's, drummers, oh, you hit things for a living. You're stupid. Bro, the guy wrote orchestra parts for every part now. Like, mind blowing. Neil Peart, I believe, had a doctorate in percussion. He's playing bells. He's playing marimba. He plays that cat electronic thing. He's playing electronic drums. He's playing drum set. He's not just a drummer. He is a musician. Stuart was a musician. He added marimbas in parts. All these kind of things to make these songs come to life. If you took away that drumming, you do not have the Police. Like Dave Matthews. You take away Carter Beauford, who was definitely influenced by Stuart Copeland. You take away those drums, you don't have Dave Matthews, in my opinion.
I want to get
those drummers are attributes.
I want to get your thoughts on the song Mother, because it kind of stands out on that album because it's so different. It's dark, it's strange. It's not Sting that's singing. To me, it sounds like an outtake from Pink Floyd's album The Wall, like just a strange character. And it generated controversy when it came out. People saying that's by far the worst song on an all-time great album. What are your thoughts on the song? And I feel like it just, maybe it's not the best song on the album, but it adds extra character to the album as a whole because it's painting a certain color in that palette.
I'll be dead honest. I skip it all the time.
How dare you, sir?
I know I do, because there's nothing that moves me in that. I mean, it's a storyline. I get it, but there's so many other songs I want to listen to, and I hear don't, and then those like slaps and stuff like talking, and I'm like, I'm not into it. But I need to dig back into it. Maybe that I matured more in my listening. Maybe I should go down that road and listen to it a little bit more in depth.
So I have one funny thing I found, and then I have a little bit of critical acclaim for the album, and then we'll move on to your next choice. So the Police kind of had this iconic bleach blonde hair, all the members. It was just this thing with the Police. And apparently this was completely by mistake, that way back in the beginning, before they had made a bunch of money, they were filming a commercial for Wrigley's gum. And they got the part on the
Yeah.
condition that they all bleached their hair blonde. So they did it for the money. And then the commercial just never aired. And, you know, maybe they
And
had
they're
gigs
stuck with
shortly
blonde
after
hair.
that, or maybe they did a music video and they just, from that point, became known for the blonde hair and they kept it. So it's completely by accident.
I mean, they had that 80s look too, like spiked hair, short, bleached, um, crazy outfits in the 80s, baggy pants, like the MC Hammer kind of pants with checkerboard kind of print on it. Because at that time, that was hip, So the bleach blonde hair was like Billy Idol. That was the thing. Um, you know, Dan Todd, one of my great friends who played with Platinum Blonde, were they all blonde?
Not naturally.
Not naturally, right? So, you know, I guess if your band's Platinum Blonde, you do platinum blonde hair because then it's like, really, you're gonna be that band, But with the Police, I think it worked with them doing all those It's like Rush. I watched a documentary and they're talking about all the elaborate outfits they wore through their years. They're like, one cycle we look like wizards. Then the next we're trying to figure out who we were in the 80s, So I think it just era after era, you're trying to find out to blend in and also go against the grain and try to be a trendsetter, then follow I always have this hat one of my best friends gave me. It said, be a lion, not a sheep.
Yeah, there's a quote I love that was lions don't lose sleep over the opinions of sheep, something like that.
Yeah.
So a little acclaim for the Police as well as that album. So Rolling Stone has that album Synchronicity at number 159 on the 500 greatest albums of all time list, and 4 out of the 5 Police albums are on that greatest albums of all time list. 4 out of 5, which is wild. And I guess the last thing is they came back together for a reunion tour in 2008, and that year they were the highest earning musicians in the world, because that reunion tour was the highest grossing tour of 2007, 2008. So if they wanted to, they could get back together, and if $2,000 a
sells
day,
tickets.
if $2,000 a day for Every Breath You Take isn't enough for Sting, he can make hundreds of millions here. So
yeah, when you're making $14,000 doing nothing, just sitting back, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't mind seeing them live if they could get
That's
back
one
together.
song. That's one song. We're not talking about publishing on every other solo stuff, which was massive. It's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't know that Andy's actually 10 years older than the other guys. So if the other guys are getting up there, Andy's 10 years older. So
yeah, he can get him a Denny's discount.
there you go.